looking at the second generation of Bushnells here in the United States, right in America. Richard Bushnell, who came over when he was 12 years old with his brother Francis and other brothers, who would sail into either Salem or Boston, Massachusetts. They would eventually make their way down to here where I'm at right now in Connecticut, and to possibly to settle here in Guilford, Connecticut. And it's believed that Richard Bushnell would have lived here with his brother Francis for a season until he would eventually marry and move on to Norwich, Connecticut. So Richard came over with 4 of his brothers into Boston or Salem, and once their dad settled here, who was one of the founders of Guilford, Connecticut in 1639, that they all, or some of them, came down here to settle with their dad. So from 1635 to 1639, we're not absolutely sure what they did or didn't do, but a couple years after the founding of Guilford, it seems that they made their way here. So some interesting things about Richard. He was the 9th of 11 children. He was born on the 20th of April, 1623 in Hershall, Sussex County, England, where all of his siblings were born, and then would sail to the United States or to America in or about 1635. He was married to Mary Marvin on October 11th, 1646 in Hartford, Connecticut. Now, the Marvin family are some of the settlers of Hartford. So there you'll see the Marvin name on the stone that was erected in honor of the ones who settled Hartford. All right, so Richard and Mary had 4 children together. Joseph in 1651, Richard in 1652, Mary in 1654, and Marcy in 1657. During this time, they did move to Norwalk, where Mary Marvin's father, Richard Bushnell's father-in-law, was also helping to found Norwalk. They looked like they were going to buy a house there, but we don't know if they actually lived there. Richard did pass away. So after Richard died, his wife Mary married Thomas Adgate and moved to Norwich, Connecticut, where Thomas was known as Deacon Thomas Adgate. He was potentially the first or one of the first pastors who pastored in Norwich, Connecticut. We don't know how or the exact date of when Richard Bushnell passed away. So as we look at some more history of Richard and the Adgate family, that Thomas Adgate, Deacon Thomas Adgate, would have been put in charge of Richard Bushnell's estate when he passed away and Thomas married Mary. So when about a decade later, 10 years later, Thomas Adgate did sell about 2,000 acres of land on behalf of the Bushnell children. So it is clear that Richard Bushnell had been prosperous and that the Bushnells continue to be prosperous on behalf of those who are taking care of their estate, making Joseph Bushnell, the next generation, the 3rd generation, very prosperous.